Namaste to all of you. Very warm welcome to this evening's Zoom call. As always, it's been a tradition. We have been inviting one notable guest every day. Today we have Aditya Raj Kaul ji. As you all know, he's a Kashmiri Pundit, and then he's a journalist of repute. He was one of the journalists who were part of the initial team of Republic as well. And he visited many hot spots in the world, if you may want to call it, ISIS areas, and then Palestine areas and what have you. He has been there, he has seen it. He has seen conflict in Kashmir, he knows what Kashmir is all about, and so he has seen conflict in the rest of the world as well. And his Twitter handle or his views are largely respected and followed. It's nice to have him with us. He's going to share his experiences with us. Today we thought, actually Article 370 is actually an old story. We all know it's all gone now. Everybody is focused on coronavirus. Sorry, let me correct myself. Chinese Wuhan coronavirus. We don't want to call it by any other name. We need to name and shame China. So, but then being a Kashmiri, he has actually seen how this is panning out, how Article 370 was tarnished, the abrogation has been tarnished, how the media is playing into the hands of anti-India forces. He has obviously inside information of what these people are doing. So we thought we'll combine these two. What happened post that and what is still happening, like Imran Khan every single day, he spews venom, and then his cohorts in India, join hands with him and talk nonsense. Now suddenly Islamophobia came up and whatnot. So we're going to hear from Aditya all these aspects. He has the floor and he can talk for whatever time. We'll not disrupt his thought process. Once his initial thoughts are over, then as you all know, we will open for question answer session, and then you're free to ask whatever you want, and then we'll see how it goes. Aditya, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Giridharji. And thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me. Namaskar to all, firstly. It is a great privilege and honor to be here amongst you all, especially because we are all fellow nationalists. And I would love that every Indian be a born nationalist. Unfortunately, these days that isn't the case. But I'm sure the work of you all that you have been doing for years together since almost last 3 decades and in several other parts of India will also yield results. The topic that has been given to me is about Jammu and Kashmir, is about the coronavirus, but particularly it is about the role of the media and the narrative that has been unfortunately set against the country in both these issues as well. I'll give you a brief introduction about myself, which will make you understand who I am, where I come from, what I believe in. And thereafter, perhaps we'll move towards Jammu and Kashmir, finally the role of the media and also the present crisis around coronavirus and how we have some people across the globe who are almost upset that enough people are not dying in India and why this narrative has been set up. We'll talk in detail about that. So, my name is Aditya Raj Kaul. I am a Kashmiri Pandit, as Giridharji mentioned. I hail from a place called Ramallah in Srinagar, Kashmir. My forefathers, of course, lived there for hundreds of years, unfortunately till 1989-90. I was just about 9 months old when terrorism struck finally in the Kashmir Valley. My father, Dr. Principal Correspondent, was a publisher, is a publisher in fact. And he owned one of the oldest publication houses in the Kashmir Valley called Utpal Publications. And he was involved with several political activities as well. He was a senior member in the Jammu and Kashmir Sangh as well. And thereafter, what we saw is unfortunately history. You all know what happened. Of course, there were these slogans that happened. Pundits were killed. They were particularly chosen, selected, reputed Kashmiri Pundits, be it a reputed singer or a poet like Sarvanand Koul Premi in Anantnag, a justice of the High Court like Neelkant Ganju, or even the Vice President of the BJP of that time in Jammu and Kashmir, Tikalal Taplu, who were murdered on the streets of Srinagar and in different parts of the valley. So there were around about a few thousand Kashmiri Pundits who were killed, but till date, unfortunately, there hasn't been conviction even in one case, not even a single case where a terrorist, Islamist jihadi, has been convicted. So that's how history has shaped over the years. For 30 years, there have been cases pending. Particularly, you would have heard of this beast of a terrorist called Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate. Can you imagine, in the courts of India, for 30 years, cases have been pending against them. And after almost 30 years now, the courts say that we will deliver speedy justice. But now, still, we are waiting for some justice to really happen. And these are not cases of killings of Kashmiri Pandits. These are killings of Indian Air Force personnel and the daughter of the then Home Minister who was kidnapped at that time. So imagine, if such cases cannot get justice in 30 years, when will Kashmiri Pandits really get justice? So as I mentioned, I was only 9 months old when this really tragedy happened. And we moved out to Jammu. We stayed in we were fortunate to not stay in a camp, but it was no better than a camp. We stayed in a garage for 3 months in 1990 in an area called Bakshi Nagar in Jammu. And thereafter, we moved to Delhi. So later in the mid-90s, Doordarshan aired a documentary on my great-grandfather. His name was Pandit Samsar Chand Kaul. He was the first ornithologist of Asia. And he had written several books on Kashmir as well. So some of the prominent ones included Birds of Kashmir, Beautiful Environs of Kashmir as well. And in fact, for you all, I've also just bought this copy of Shankaracharya. And this book particularly has been published in the 50s, 60s. So we have a couple of copies with us. And interestingly, this is published in Mysore. I think it was a printing press of British India, PM Kurveli, at the Wesley Press in Mysore. So it's a mini book that was in those days given to all the tourists who used to come to Kashmir. This was about Shankaracharya. Now we know there has been a systematic campaign over the years to even change the name of Holy Shankaracharya to Takhte Suleiman. And this systematic campaign has been on for a very long time. It's not just Shankaracharya, it's also Anantnag, which is now referred to as Islamabad. So we've been doing this campaign. I will come to that as well. So, once this migration really happened, we stayed in Jammu for 9 months. Then we came to Delhi. My father was a publisher, had to start everything from scratch. But in the meantime, he was associated politically. He, in fact, came up with this idea along with his friends of Panun Kashmir. And they started a movement of Panun Kashmir that we want a separate homeland for Kashmiri Pandits, and we cannot live amongst the Islamist jihadis anymore. And that campaign resumed for a very long time. But unfortunately, while he was traveling all across India and giving lectures and making these awareness campaigns, he suffered a hemorrhage. And he had to undergo several operations, but he lost vision of one eye. So he cannot see from one eye due to the stress and what really happened during that exodus. So we started life from scratch back again. My father used to rented a small room in Shakarpur and thereafter in Dilshad Garden in the east of Delhi. And further we moved on and started life from scratch yet again. In the mid-90s, as I mentioned, Doordarshan aired a documentary on my great-grandfather, his ancestral house, and how he was in possession of some ancestral paintings of Swachhand Bhairav of Kashmir. And those 3 paintings were shown on a show called Kashmir File that used to come in the early 90s in Doordarshan. And the same day, some of these Islamist jihadis went to our house in Rainawari, Srinagar, and gutted the entire house. Now, this house was important because it had more than 10 to 15,000 books. It had artifacts. It had, whatnot, collections of last 200 to 300 years, and everything was gutted completely. So this remains one of the major, I get emotional always when I think about this, that maybe we could have requested the army, maybe we could have requested the police to get our this ancestral house in a couple of trucks back. But unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have that kind of a bandwidth or that kind of a thinking that this would be an exile that would continue for decades and decades. It's been 30 years already. Who knows how long more? In any case, my father continued with his campaign of Panun Kashmir and activities down here. And thereafter, in the year 2006, I started. I just accidentally, I wouldn't say that I started it with some kind of an intention, but accidentally started a campaign. You must have heard of a couple of cases, Jessica Lal and Priyadarshini Mattu. That happened, rape and murder that had taken place. So there was this Jessica Lal campaign on, and Priyadarshini Mattu was also a Kashmiri Pundit. She was a student of Delhi University. So I just came across this case. For 10 years, there was no justice, and there had to be something that had to be done. One, that her family met this exile, and then these parents had to suffer this rape and murder of their elder daughter. So I was a 16, 17-year-old at that time, and I really didn't know. And during those days, there was no WhatsApp, Facebook, or Twitter, or social media wasn't very active. So I started the signature campaign. I collected a few thousand signatures somehow online, and some television channels got in touch with me, and we started this campaign for Priyadarshini Mattu. And a case where for 10 years there wasn't any justice. The High Court of New Delhi took cognizance and put that case into daily trial. And finally, within 2 months, the man who was out, the criminal, got death sentence because of the campaign of Kashmiri Pundits. Of course, there were several other Kashmiri Pundits, including Anupam Kher and Ashok Pandit and others who also joined in that campaign. So while we all collectively worked in this case, I thought that, I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, I'm a teenager, and I haven't done anything for my own community. So, and my own generation wasn't even able to speak Kashmiri. I was an odd case. I spoke good Kashmiri, but there weren't, people from my age who understood Kashmiri customs, culture, etc., or even had the same kind of emotional, attachment with Kashmir. So we formed this group called Roots in Kashmir. I, along with a few friends in 2006, came up with this idea and started this campaign called Roots in Kashmir. There were multiple functions of Roots in Kashmir. One was that we had to spread awareness, not just across India, but across the globe. Second was that, there was this narrative that was set up. At that time, we realized that for decades together, there was this narrative set up by the radical separatists of Kashmir, including Yasin Malik, Mirwais, Gilani, Shabir Shah, etc., and who got support from people in New Delhi and elsewhere, including those of Arundhati Roy, Sanjay Kak, and all these people who used to support them, create these seminars. At that time, there was Madhu Kishwar as well, but later I remember one of the events of Madhu Kishwar where she invited Yasin Malik, and me and Sushil Pandit, we had a major confrontation with Yasin Malik, and Madhu Kishwar almost threw me out of that event. But such was our enthusiasm at that time. We, at least 20, 30 or 40 of us, we used to land up at each and every seminar or program of these radical separatists, not indulge in any kind of violence, but just confront them with facts and tell them that you cannot continue with this narrative any longer. We are the victims. We are the original inhabitants of the Kashmir Valley, and we will prevail. So that campaign continued for, many, many years. In fact, we also realized that these cases that were pending against Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate had to be, started yet again. So we campaigned in that regard as well. And finally, we see some hope that maybe in the next 2 years, there could be some justice and Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate could be thrown into gallows. During that time, while there were stone pelting and all these things that were prevalent across the Kashmir Valley, there came 2008, and there was the Amarnath land agitation, if you remember. And I was still an activist back then, and I was just about to join the media. And I started this group called the Amarnath Action Committee in New Delhi, along with some friends. And they were not these ordinary friends. They were people from all strata of society. Uh, there were nobodies, there were people who were vice presidents of companies, there were people who were really educated. And I remember an instance where we protested outside the house of Saifuddin Source, who was the water resources minister of that time. And 50 or 60 of us, all very well educated people, some of them on very high positions, we went all there, parked our cars, protested outside, and somehow, I don't know how, the protest turned a little violent. Not exactly violent, but tempers were really running high. And some of the protesters really barged into his residence, and there was a skirmish with the police. And that was the first time that I was arrested. And for the next 24 hours, I was in a prison along with fellow activists, 50 of us. My car was also taken away by the police. And the police commissioner of Delhi at that time said that there was no chance that, we'll let you go, because this is for the first time, perhaps since independence of India, that some protesters have barged into the residence of a union minister and almost broken the house. But such was the tempers, really, because these radical separatists, what they used to do is every year, they used to systematically carve out a campaign, get global funding, get support globally, and put this as an issue of a Hindu India going against Muslim Kashmir, which wasn't the case. The case was very much opposite of the Islamist jihadis backed by Pakistan, really creating a havoc each year, every year with different issues, really. So this happened, and later several other campaigns. We went from university to university all across India. We campaigned all across the globe as well. We held these protests all across. There are some significant days for Kashmiri Pundits that are the 14th September that we mark as Martyrs Day, and the 19th and the 20th of January, which is the Holocaust Day or the Exodus Day. So these are very significant and important. This is apart from the festivals that we celebrate of Shivratri and Navre. So these are, I think, 4 or 5 most significant years for Kashmiri Pundits. And in exile as well, this has remained a custom for each and every Kashmiri Pundits across the globe to mark these days. In fact, just this year in January and Feb, I was in United States for a month. I was invited by the US State Department for an exchange. And I made it a point that everywhere that I went, Washington, D.C., New York, Iowa, Colorado, or Michigan, I met the local Kashmiri Pundits out there. And I was thrilled as to how they still maintain the customs. Very few of them, a handful of them, have been staying there for more than 50 years. But still they can speak Kashmiri, still they can have the same customs. And most importantly, whenever there is an Exodus Day or Martyrs Day, they mark that. And we, of course, have got support over the years from across India as well. Coming now to the systematic way how the media has played a very unfortunate role, particularly about Kashmiri Pundits, but overall about the Kashmir issue as well. We know since 1990 that there was no social media, of course, but there wasn't media as aggressive as it is today. There used to be Doordarshan, All India Radio. There used to be few newspapers, including the Times of India and the Indian Express. And of course, there used to be the BBC or some of the foreign press. But they haven't done justice to any kind of reportage as to the ethnic cleansing and the genocide of Kashmiri Pundits that has happened in 1990. There haven't been any campaigns run by them. There haven't been any individual case studies done by them as to why justice was denied. There haven't been any questions raised to the chief minister of that time, Farooq Abdullah. Instead, the local minuscule minority of Kashmiri Muslim radicals started this campaign 30 years ago that it was Jagmohan who was responsible for the exodus of Kashmiri Pundits, which is, if I can put it in the most aggressive terms, bullshit. I mean, this isn't the reality. If Jagmohan wasn't there, wouldn't have been possible for me to join this Zoom conference today, and I would have been killed. Jagmohan was the savior of Kashmiri Pundits in many ways. So over the 30 years, this policy of the Indian media has continued. We know that the most of the Indian media, they may not reveal, but they are of a leftist character. And this has been inbuilt with them for many years. And I remember particularly I have personal experience because since 2006, when I started Roots in Kashmir, it was very hard to convince the Indian media to even report on our protests, on our campaigns, or any events that we did. We used to almost beg before the bureau chiefs of Times of India and Hindustan Times and Indian Express that, this is an important event, and even if you give a one paragraph coverage, that would be enough for us. But there wasn't any. And this has continued over the years. I would, in fact, narrate an instance without naming the editor. A very popular English channel of India, which has existed for almost more than 20 years now, and a female editor of that channel, who is known as so-called Kashmir expert, and known for her coverage during the Kargil days as well. She wanted to do a show on Kashmir. And initially when I did Priyadarshini Mattu and Jessica Lal campaigns, she used to invite me regularly on her shows. Once she came to know about my roots in Kashmir, she invited me again. And as is the case, I cannot mince any words, and I took on Kashmiri separatists and I showed them the mirror in her show. Next time she had to organize a similar event in Kashmir where she wanted panelists from all sides, but she wanted a couple of Kashmiri Pundit names as well. So one of the guest coordinators of this female editor came to my residence, especially to invite me for this event to Kashmir. I was happy because I had never gone to Kashmir till that time. And I really wanted to, because this would give me an opportunity to go to Kashmir. So this particular gentleman who came to my residence, he requested me to give me names of around 10 to 20 Kashmiri Pandit, popular or speakers who speak well, including like Sushil Pandit, Lalit Ambardar, and others who could be good speakers for the show. So I, as very innocently, gave him around 20-25 names. And that was the last time that I heard from them. Later I realized, in fact, somebody close to that editor called me and said that, in a few days from that meeting, that this editor took all these names because she wanted to ensure that nobody who is in touch with you or from your organization comes to your show. So she has banned you, and she has banned your organization, and she has banned most of the sane who Kashmiri Pandit voices. So you can imagine how systematically the media does what it does in regard to coverage.
Aditya ji, let me intervene here. That is NDTV and Barkadat. Let's have no confusion about it. You may not name it, but I can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So, I will. I haven't finished this particular story because, Kashmiri Pandit being Kashmiri Pandit and an activist and a future journalist being future journalist, I had to do what I had to. So, incidentally, what happened, there was a very good friend of mine at that time working in her team who separately asked me that, I feel really bad that she's doing this to you. And I want genuine Kashmiri Pandits to go. So can you give me still a couple of names who are not in that list, and I will invite them. So I gave a couple of names, and those names went to Kashmir. And she had a hard time because, of course, they spoke the reality. They took on the Kashmiri separatists, and they did not sing to the tunes. So this, business of half-truths, propaganda, and anti-India narrative has continued for a very long time. We see this prevalent more because social media is more active now. The space has shrunk. But this has been there for decades together. In fact, I'll give you another example of the same editor. When I was, for the first time, I got an opportunity to visit my own home, Kashmir, in 2013. Instantly, I'll tell you all that I might have gone to Kashmir almost 24 times in the last 8 or 9 years, seven odd years, but it's always for work. I have never gone back home with my parents. I have never returned to my home. It's not even as a tourist. So it's always been on a work assignment that I'm going to visit Kashmir. So in 2013, there was for a week-long India-Pakistan encounter at the Keren sector. Keren is in Kupwara in North Kashmir. And it is one of the hot sectors where, there's a lot of, unfortunately, bloodshed and fighting that happens between India and Pakistan. And for 3-4 days, I was a vegetarian. And, it was a hard time to get food there because I used to go early in the morning at 5 a.m. to Kupwara from Srinagar, return in the dead of the night. And every day I used to repeat this process. And I had a huge team of around 5-6 people with me as well. So for 3-4 days, I used to go there regularly, report. I used to work for Times Now during those days. And on the 4th or the 5th day, I see this particular editor with a huge entourage come in. And the same evening, while I was returning from Kupwara, I saw her reporting, saying that she's reporting from the Keren sector live. And I saw there's a mini road that connects Keren to Kupwara and Kupwara to Srinagar. And I came through that entire stretch and I didn't see her anywhere. And I checked from the army. And then I checked from somebody in her team that where she was reporting from. And they told me that she's just on the outskirts of Srinagar doing live. But she's saying that she's live from Keren sector. I wrote this on Twitter. I countered her on Twitter. But obviously she had a lot of abuses, etc. for me and my friends who exposed. So this isn't just Kargil, but this has been ongoing for a very long time of this particular editor and overall as well. Coming now to Article 370. Article 370 is something that should have been thrown into the dustbin of history decades ago. When I knew, in fact, this happened on 5th of August, but I think 2 or 3 months before that, I had an idea that it is, somebody in the helm of affairs had invited me for some discussion to advise them on some front. And then later, I, along with some people, was sent to Kashmir to prepare a report as to what's been happening on ground and to advise the government. And I realized that government was working towards it, although I didn't have confidence because no government or no politician had the courage to, in fact, take this step till date. So at that time, I had an inkling that something of this order is going to happen. So I kept on digging a little more about Article 370. In fact, I should have kept it here, but I don't think I'm carrying it right now. Maybe in the next chat or maybe through WhatsApp, I'll send it across. I have another booklet of almost 50 years ago of former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And he was the first person to bring in a resolution inside the Parliament India for the abrogation of Article 370. And he was the lone person at that time. I think it was, if I'm not wrong, in the mid or the early 60s that this happened. And it is those people who can understand Hindi, and I think, I'm not sure if it has been translated into English as well. It's a 10-page booklet. It talks about if we don't remove Article 370, how Kashmir will change in the next decades. And exactly what Atal Bihari Vajpayee has mentioned in that 10-page speech inside the Indian Parliament in the early 60s is what happened. He said that Kashmir will go away from you significantly. He said that there will be multiple power centers that will come up. There will be withdraw against your own army and forces if you don't take an iron hand approach in this regard. But at that time, the Home Minister, I don't remember who was the Home Minister at that time, convinced Atal Bihari Vajpayee to take back this resolution in the so-called larger good of India. And unfortunately, that happened. If this would have happened 50 years ago, I'm pretty sure that Jammu and Kashmir would have been in a very different position at this stage. As I mentioned, somebody at the top had invited me 3 months before Article 370 abrogation and asked me about what's been happening in Kashmir. And suddenly he said that, what do you think should happen? There is this special status given to Kashmir, and for decades we have been talking about solution, this and that, healing touch, etc. What do you think should happen? I said, what special status? Are you talking about 370? He said, yeah, 370. I said, 370 should go, ideally. And 370, there's no business of Jammu and Kashmir as a hardcore nationalist, or even if I'm not a nationalist as an Indian, why should I have 370? If a person in Telangana, a person in West Bengal, a person in Kerala does not have a special status, why should a Kashmiri or a person from Jammu have a separate status or a special status? He said, yeah, I understand. I said, why do you ask about 370? He said, no, I'm just generally asking you. He said, but why only 370? Why not 35A as well? I said, Meri Bala say you should do it right away. I mean, I would be the happiest person on earth if you just go away with Article 370 and 35A. So that particular gentleman told me that, I obviously cannot name him, but he was somebody significant in the power structure, in the security establishment. And that particular person told me that give me 3 months and I am giving you my word to a Kashmiri Pandit that I will do it in 3 months. And if I don't do it in 3 months, you change my name or you do whatever you want to against me, but I will prove it. And I, inside my heart, said that, this person is joking and, how can this even be possible? But later, after a few months, I think this happened in about April or May, this meeting. And in June, I was contacted by the Home Ministry. And I was requested that if I could make a 3-day visit to Kashmir. And I would be taken to meet different people, including the governor, the chief secretary, other different secretaries, the DGP, the GOC, etc. So I made that meeting along with a few others. And later I met the Home Minister as well. They requested me for some suggestions, which I gave appropriately. And for the first time, I saw that whatever suggestions we gave were acted upon. So this was a pleasant surprise for me that it was finally happening. But there is a greater context to it as well. I will give you a few details. And I have been speaking about it. I went to the Pondicherry Literature Festival. I went to that Mumbai Literature Festival. And I also spoke at the India Foundation event recently on Kashmir, but not in greater detail. But perhaps for the first time, it's important to understand that while it is important to question Pakistan, while it is important to question the radical separatists, and we have been doing that and we will always, it is also important to understand if we ourselves have committed mistakes. If the political establishment over the years has succumbed under pressure of the radical separatists, has succumbed under the pressure of some of the politicians of Kashmir, and given away Kashmir step by step. And here I not only question the political establishment of the Kashmir Valley, the so-called Abdullahs and the Muftis of the world, but I also question the security establishment of India. And this is important. You don't always see a nationalist or a hardcore Indian or somebody who loves the forces question the security establishment. But this is important. This is important because what has happened over the years, and many people don't know, is that radical separatists, while they enjoyed money, moral support, etc. from Pakistan, from Islamabad, they also did that from New Delhi. And this is not done. This policy of engagement that happened for a very long time, I would also name names here. I may not name the editor because, I don't want to give her any credibility or publicity, but I will name this particular person in the security establishment because this compromises the sovereignty and national integrity and democratic values and the patriotism of every Indian. This particular person is A.S. Dullat. A.S. Dullat was, in fact, the Raw Chief of India. And before that, he was the Special Director of the Intelligence Bureau. And of course, in the recent years, he has been in news because he wrote a book on Pakistan and Kashmir, etc. 2 books, in fact. One, he wrote on Kashmir, his experiences in Kashmir. And second, he wrote along with his co-author, who was the ISI Chief Durrani. Now, I as a person from Kashmir, hold Durrani and A.S. Dullat responsible for the creation of the Hurriyat Conference in Kashmir. There was no Hurriyat in Kashmir till the early 90s. Between 89 and 93, there was this germination of the concept of Hurriyat. It is of course a larger subject. There was a role of United States as well. There were several meetings that happened in Washington, D.C., etc. But to a great extent, Durrani and A.S. Dullat were responsible for the creation of Hurriyat because they thought that if there is some kind of a power structure of radical separatists there, which is controlled by New Delhi and Pakistan, then there could be some peace and some solution, which was utter crap, and it did not yield any results. Rather, what we saw, terrorism only increasing, radicalism only increasing, and people like Yasin Malik, people like Shabir Shah, people like Naeem Khan, and even people like Sajad Lone, who later converted himself into mainstream politics, used to get money from the intelligence bureau. They used to enjoy the patronage of New Delhi over the years. Now with the abrogation of Article 370, this has been changed. For the first time, there is an understanding in the Kashmir Valley that these games will not work. For the first time, there is fear that the Indian rules and regulations and law of the land is working down on ground, but still not entirely. If you remember, just about when Article 370 was abrogated, Shah Faisal was still out. And Shah Faisal was about to leave the country when he was arrested. And then he has been, of course, in house arrest. There was another lady called Sheila Rashid, who, of course, is very popular on social media for abusing the country, for abusing the government, etc. But I suspected that there's something wrong. They're getting some kind of a patronage. And later, to my horror, I found that both Shah Faisal and Sheila Rashid were getting security from the J&K government, and from some kind of unnamed sources got accommodation as well, particularly Sheila Rashid, who is a nobody. Shah Faisal, I can still say he has been a former bureaucrat, etc. But Sheila Rashid got an accommodation on the Gupka Road in Kashmir. Now, Gupka Road, if people know, is like the Khan Market or the Prithviraj Road of New Delhi, which is the most posh, most popular, most expensive, and only the chief ministers or the industrialists, etc., can own property there. So I exposed yet again that why should a person who's a nobody, who's not even, somebody who does a job, who doesn't even earn money, can get accommodation of this nature in Gupkar Road. And later there was some kind of a changes that happened. But the point that I'm trying to make is that while the intentions of the government might be crystal clear, that we have to take radical separatists and these politicians who compromise on the integrity and sovereignty of India with an iron fist, there are still some elements. There are still some progenies of A.S. Dullat who survive on the Indian soil, who continue to sell their souls, who continue to compromise Jammu and Kashmir all the more. But this is a praiseworthy step for the first time that has been taken by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. But there shouldn't be compromises. At this moment, what I see is that there is a large population in the Kashmir Valley which is silent right now, who are happy that people like Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti have been arrested, put on house arrest, etc. But they cannot speak out. If they speak out, they're killed. If you remember, soon after Article 370 abrogation, there were a few shopkeepers who were killed. Now, these shopkeepers were Kashmiri Muslim. They were not Kashmiri Hindus. They were Kashmiri Muslim and they were killed. Why? Because they said that we are not going to listen to these diktats of terrorists, etc. We are going to open our shops, we are going to survive, and we are going to take you guys head on. And unfortunately, in the middle of the day, gunmen came and shot them point blank range. So there is a large population within the Kashmir Valley as well who need support, who consider themselves as nationalists as well. I'm in touch with several of them who do not get appropriate security, who do not get appropriate hearing several times because of the hiccups of the bureaucratic level or the hiccups at the security establishment level. So as we progress ahead and as we try to revive the politics of Jammu and Kashmir, what we have to keep in mind is that there is a nationalist population that we need to really support. We need to grow this nationalist population. In fact, when I suggested the Home Minister, during that Article 370 abrogation period, I also told them, as Giridharji also has traveled to most of the temples in the Kashmir Valley and some of the very far-flung areas. I said, right now only Shankaracharya or the Kheer Bhavani in Tulmul or the Vaishno Devi in Jammu or a couple of temples here and there are popular. Why don't you create a temple circuit for the Hindu population across India so that they can travel? There is Gangabal, there is, different other areas and far across areas in different districts of the Kashmir Valley, from Shopian to Kupwara to Handwara, where temples are located. you could renovate them, and you could create these different temple circuits. And finally, Nirmala Sitharamanji heard, and she finally has suggested these three temple circuits, apart from a Sufi, circuit as well. But, this is important. If we have to establish and make people understand that this is not the old tactics, this is not the old government, this is not the same way that we survived for the last 30 years, you have to establish this. You have to establish the rule of law, and you have to establish the Hindu identity of the Kashmir Valley yet again as well. So what happened during that Article 370 period, as you all know, from New York Times to Washington Post to BBC to Al Jazeera, everyone attacked the Indian government. And we, some of us, including me, my friend Rahul Pandita, my another friend Aarti Tikku Singh, and a few other journalists who were in Kashmir, who were staying there, who were reporting regularly, we were targeted as mukbirs, almost like, we were agents of the Indian state, and we were not journalists who were working there. So this has been the travesty that has happened, that when we report honestly about, traffic moving, there is no curfew at all, we were branded as somebody who is lying blatantly. But we reported what we saw out there. And I remember an instance when I returned from Kashmir and Al Jazeera contacted me, and somehow I thought that, just for the perspective's sake, usually I would have avoided it. But when it came to Kashmir and I saw a lot of propaganda, I said, one must speak to them, and one must speak to them about facts and reality, and even question them and their coverage. So I spoke to Al Jazeera. They came to my house. I gave a detailed interview about how Al Jazeera had reported about the Article 370 abrogation against the government. But they had not reported about how there's not been even a single killing by security forces, how there have been no rioting that has been reported, how there has been no stone pelting in the Kashmir Valley ever since the abrogation of Article 370. And I told them that the only killings that have happened in Kashmir Valley are of that truck driver who was plying with goods and stone pelters killed him. And those traders that came from Punjab, from different parts of the country to get apple from North Kashmir and South Kashmir, and they were killed point blank range by these Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. And not a single report of Al Jazeera mentioned this. So what Al Jazeera did very smartly in their report is that they edited this portion where I was questioning Al Jazeera and where I was questioning how the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism has not been reported by Al Jazeera. And they only kept a small part of it, maybe just a 30-second clip where I was telling them about the reportage. So the only positive factor that I see right now is that with the advent of Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, and different social media platforms, every person is a journalist today. Every person has the right to question. Every person has the same amount of, medium space to reach out to everyone. While the world has shrunk, there have been people who have come out and reflected the reality on social media. So what has significantly changed is that while the international press did question us, did run campaigns against us, also we should realize that there's a lot of Islamist money that goes into it. While I was visiting United States, I met a lot of people, not just in Indian embassy, but I also met the officials of United States State Department who confessed that there is this Islamist organization in US that funds a lot of protests against India, that funds a lot of campaigns, and particularly after Article 370, almost millions were spent on these hoardings across United States against the Indian government, and systematically calling this a Hindu campaign against Islam in Jammu and Kashmir. So, but what has significantly changed is that the power of social media is still there. So people from Jammu and Kashmir, people from mainstream, mainland India also came out giving out the reality and questioning the foreign media, which in fact changed a lot of things. I would also hold responsible the Indian government to us, because facts have to be put out. while I praise the Indian government and the Indian bureaucrats and the security establishment for a very absolute brave step that they've taken in the Kashmir Valley, while I praise them for amazing level of coordination with the security forces, ensuring that not a single bullet is fired. But on the messaging front, we were not prepared. While I was I've been in touch with the National Security Council, I've been in touch with the Indian Foreign Ministry, with Home Ministry. Somewhere I felt that there was no coordination between the Home Ministry, the External Affairs Ministry, the National Security Council on Jammu and Kashmir and other issues as well concerning the messaging. I know that while there is a attack from all corners, it gets difficult to really answer them all. It gets difficult to come out. But the reality is that you need to have a strategy in mind. You need to either behave like Trump or China. Either you decide that you ignore it, like Trump does to CNN and other media, or like China does most of the times, not bothering about it. Or you need to come out with facts. There was an instance I remember, there was a major protest that was organized by these radical separatists in Saura of Srinagar, soon after the Article 370 abrogation. And during that time, there were, I think, about 500 or 600 people who might have come to that particular protest. And it was a peaceful protest. There was some aerial firing that was done just to disperse the crowd, and that's about it. Somehow, even though there was no internet, etc., the BBC managed to get that clip on a file to New Delhi. And that BBC clip was aired across. And the Indian government said that, no, nothing of this sort has happened and this is a blatant lie. A week later, the Indian government said that, no, this is the reality. That the protest did happen and it was peaceful, etc. So there was a lack of trust that happened during that time. So I also suggested that you need to have a messaging strategy. You need to have a communication strategy at that particular time. Because this step of Article 370 that was taken was not against anyone. This was to restore the rights, because in reality, if you see, there was so much of discrimination that was happening, which has ended finally. The biggest of all discrimination that would have even led to Supreme Court of India putting this into dustbin was with Dalits and the Dalit and the Valmiki Samaj that mainly stayed in Jammu. So I don't know if many of you know, I'm sure many of you would have read about it. According to Article 370 and 35A, the Valmiki Samaj that came from Punjab mainly about 40 to 50 years back to Jammu and Kashmir and who really worked as municipal workers or sanitation workers. According to the law, 35A and 370, their children, sons and daughters could only apply for municipal worker job, for sanitation worker job and no other government job. Can you imagine? In the India of 2019 and 2020, this absurd discriminatory law where the Dalit and the Valmiki Samaj are discriminated upon this way. I mean, they did not get an opportunity to apply for civil services. They did not get an opportunity to work in any other form in other different government organizations, but could only apply for municipal work, etc. I remember because I was in touch with one of the petitioners, Pushpendra Kulshrestha, who was one of the first petitioners against Article 370 through his NGO, We the Citizens in Supreme Court. He said when the judge for the first time read this, he said, what is this? Is this happening in India? And you imagine if by any chance, if this would have been happening in any other part of the country and somehow it was ruled by BJP or Prime Minister Modi would have been in the center stage, imagine what the international media would have done. Imagine what NDTV or other organizations would have done at that particular time. So there were no questions asked. I mean, I was astonished that these so-called Kashmir experts in New Delhi didn't even know that this law particularly existed, and there were so many people in hundreds who were being discriminated upon. So this discrimination is, I think, the biggest example of how this is a very just thing that has been done by the government and should have happened long ago. Also, what we have seen similarly is a systematic campaign now you know about it. That I would give a personal experience because, you know, I was in US. I went to US on the 25th of January and I returned on 25th of Feb. And there were, I think, a couple of cases of coronavirus at that time in United States. My mother was a little worried. My mother told me that, you know, you should wear a mask, etc. And I told her, no, nobody is wearing a mask, and, you know, I don't need to worry about it. And there were no cases in India. There were hardly any cases in South Asia. And I got back, and there was hardly any checking. Only flights from China, Italy, and I think Iran were being checked upon on New Delhi airport. But soon after, I realized that India took action. India put strict measures in place, and airports, there was checking happening all across. And in fact, we were the first ones doing a lockdown at an early stage, realizing that this could be, you know, a major task before us. Also because of the population and the clusters that, you know, where population stays, even if there are a couple of cases there, it could spread like wildfire. So it is praiseworthy that the government took steps at an early stage in India. At this moment, I think we have about 28,000 cases in India and about, I think, close to 800, I think 780 or 790 deaths that have happened. And somehow we see a systematic campaign happening in international media, I think, which has to a certain extent stopped now because a lot of questions have been raised. And there have been some Indian journalists, so-called health experts, that have been involved in that as well, who say that, you know, we are not testing enough, Indian government is not testing enough, and Indian government should be held responsible because this could lead to a mass killing. We are also almost voluntarily killing people, etc., etc., etc. But look at what is happening in the United States. There is this international committee there of you know, religions, freedom of religions, who comes out with their annual report and preaching to all across the world, who questioned the local government in Ahmedabad, saying that Hindus and Muslims were being kept separately. Bunkum, I mean, absolutely rubbish. Report came out, and later they did not have the courage to even apologize when their bluff was called upon. And imagine what's been happening in the United States. There are more than almost 9 lakh cases now. There are more than 55,000 people who have died. And there's hardly any, you know, same kind of criticism that's happening. Yes, there is a lot of criticism that happens to Trump because of the majority of the media does not have the same inclination or line of thought as Trump, which is fair enough. But like Indian government has been targeted, how Modi has been targeted, and particularly the country has been targeted, this hasn't been seen anywhere in any part of the globe. And the most astonishing fact, because I mostly cover foreign affairs over the last 12 years of my career, I have focused on foreign affairs, on internal security mainly. I've been seeing over the last 2 months how Indian government has reached out globally without any kind of bias to more than 60 countries. And we plan to, in fact, help more than 100 countries with hydroxychloroquine, with paracetamol, with other medical equipment, with even doctors, with whatever need be. I mean, I remember a special flight was sent to Maldives, a Muslim nation, and in fact, given, you know, doctors, etc., whatever was needed. I remember how UAE and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have been helped. Even USA for that matter, UK, France. We were in fact the ones who even supplied masks to China. The question that I'm pointing out here is that, have you seen across the media anywhere, you know, Indian government being praised globally for this kind of a humanitarian gesture? You know, there were, of course, reports of how Trump almost threatened India that there would be consequences if, you know, the medicine is not provided. But the question here is, India already, before Trump made that speech, had said that we are going to reach out and give these medicines to as many people as possible. And this, even as several Indians are still stranded abroad, there are flights that are cancelled. Our priority, of course, should be and is to save our Indians first. And still we are reaching out to the global community. So instead of setting this kind of a narrative against India, and we've seen this time and again, we saw this before 2014, how everything was done to ensure that Modi should not come to power, and it failed. And similarly, we saw this aggressive campaign. I remember that because I spent more than a month in Varanasi in April and May 2014, when the elections were being held and what all controversies really followed. More than 50 MPs writing to US to ban Narendra Modi, not allowing him to contest elections, etc., etc. Several campaigns held. In fact, he was initially not even allowed to do rallies in Varanasi, I remember. And there was a huge controversy around that. I had interviewed Arun Jaitley in that regard. So these campaigns have, continued, and we should be prepared for more of such campaigns. So interestingly, towards the end, what I would say, we should learn from what Prime Minister has done here. We've seen aggressive attacks on the Prime Minister for more than 15 years now. And Prime Minister is almost immune to it. What he has done is that instead of reaching out to the media always, he has used the power of the social media. He is connected directly with Indians, people who really matter. He has used aggressively social media to reach out to each and every part of the society, to each and every state and union territory every time. And that should be the priority right now. I think we should realize the power of the social media, and that should be, in fact, our focus every time we think of these systematic attacks that happen, these not just in regard to Jammu and Kashmir in Pakistan, or this so-called coronavirus that has engulfed right now. So we have to unite, and we have to use social media appropriately. One important point that I will also raise is that in many ways, I find that when it comes to cohesive action, united action, the Hindu community is not as united always. And I would start this from my own experience as a Kashmiri Pandit. We Kashmiri Pandits have many organizations. And I remember when, this part I should at least reveal, that when I was, when this Article 370 abrogation happened, 2 days before that, I got a call from the National Security Advisor, and he told me that, why don't you drop in on Monday at 11 a.m. So I said, I will come. And I didn't think much about it. During this Saturday, Sunday, this was, I think, 3rd or 4th May. The 2nd May he had called, and 3rd or 4th May this happened. And on the 5th May, this Amit Shah was going to the parliament, and everything was being organized, and Article 370 was about to be abrogated.
5th August.
5th August. So, thanks for correcting me. So on 5th of August, I went there to the his office here in Delhi, and we saw the entire broadcast of the Lok Sabha, etc., that happened, Rajya Sabha, in his office. And finally, he told me that, now you have to return. Kashmiri Pandits have to return. So I said, we will be happy to return. And I got very emotional that day. I held his hand and I said, Wal Sahab, as a Kashmiri Pandit, I thank you. I'm not here as a journalist today. As a Kashmiri Pandit, I thank you for this gesture, because for decades and for perhaps hundreds of years, this would be a historical day and moment for not just Kashmiri Pandits, but all Indians. And he said that, yes, we had to do it, and there was no question. So then I told him that, for the first time now I can say that a Brahmin from Uttarakhand and a Brahmin from Kashmir can stay together now in Kashmir, and we can own property out there. So I invite you as well, as a fellow Indian, to come there in Kashmir and stay. But one thing that really touched me there, he said, yeah, I have only one request. Can you tell your Kashmiri Pandit organizations to unite one time because of this entire thing? Because you have the Kashmiri Pandit Samiti, you have All India Kashmiri Samaj, you have Panun Kashmir, you have Kashmir Overseas Association, you have some organization here, they're all doing good work, but they're not united. So I said, sir, I will do whatever I can. But unfortunately, I realized this long back when I formed roots in Kashmir and I did whatever I could. I didn't even gain one penny out of it. And soon after, I was accused by many people that you are doing this for your own fame and publicity, this and that. And then I felt really bad and I left. I, in any case, had to leave because I had to formally join journalism and I started work from Times of India. But it felt very painful. And that day I decided that whatever I'll do as a one-man army. I will do it alone. Even if it is a social media battle, it is a campaign, it is to fund somebody, it is to organize something, or it will be a small group of friends who will come together and do that. So my appeal always is that for the larger good of our community, of India, of Bharatvarsh, we all should unite, we all should come together and focus forward. So I don't know how much I could say in this 1 hour, but I tried to cover each and every aspect. I know that these are 3 different areas actually: Jammu and Kashmir, coronavirus, and media. And we could have hours long of discussion on that and continue our debate. But this much I could share with you all. I would be happy to take any kind of questions, and I hand over now to Giriraj.
Aditya, you really spoke from your heart, and I think you poured your heart out. We could see your emotions, we could see your pains, and we could see your relief. That was really wonderful. We all share your pains and concerns, and you know that for me, Kashmir is almost like a second home for me.
Yeah.
I've seen nook and corner of Kashmir. I've been to Verinag, I've been to Gurez, you name it, I've been there. So I've experienced Kashmir, probably, I don't know. For me, it's also pretty emotional. But keeping the emotional part apart, I'm still concerned that there are these dawlats still around, which is actually worrying me. Because the great work that has been done in diluting Article 370, by the way, Article 370 still exists on the statutes, it's not gone. Yeah. It has been brought back through the back channel in the first week of April when the domicile ordinance was brought in, when they said you'll need to be here resident for 15 years. So the statement you made that an Uttarakhand Brahmin and a Kashmiri Brahmin can stay is not going to happen anytime soon. Why I'm saying that is I myself had visited all these places and I was very keen to buy property myself.
Which is true, yeah.
I had actually spoken to Farooq Saab, the current advisor to the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah.
And, I was all game for it. You know that. I had taken 10 of our colleagues post Article 370 abrogation. We went there, we toured the whole of the state. Not the state, the valley, I would say. So we were all keen to be part of the change story. But what happened? Why did this happen? That again, you brought it back. 15 years, who's going to stay in a leased property? It's not going to happen. Unless you own it, you're not going to be there permanent. That's not going to happen. So I think somehow strongly, I feel we missed the bus again. We will see this coming back. This will be a relief to those people like Pakistani evacuees and, government employees who've been staying there for some time. All those people, it will be a relief, agreed. But Kashmir is not a normal state. And you need to give a demographic change big time. And Kashmiri Pundits are not going to go back because the kind of pain, insults they have taken, the kind of insecurity they have is palpable and real. So they know it. We have not experienced it. So we may take a risk and be idiot, stupid enough to go and stay there. So probably, it has to be a collective action that we go change the situation on the ground en masse, a lot of people coming in. That is not going to happen anytime soon. So before Article 370 was diluted also, if you would have gone and seen in 99acres.com or any of these magic bricks or anywhere, properties were still sold in Jammu and Kashmir, right? If you ask them, how did you sell them? They would tell you that, we'll circumvent it. You'll get a 99-year lease plus 99 years or whatever. They used to come with some way of handling it. So that would continue even now. So effectively for the rest of the country, removing or keeping Article 370 doesn't seem to have a major impact.
Absolutely.
So that is my concern. This is where I think we seem to have missed the bus. Yeah. This needs to be rectified and rectified urgently. I can understand with regard to jobs. Maybe you give priority. For instance, in Telangana, Bangalore, Maharashtra, you always give priority for local jobs to the Marathas or Telugu people or whatever it is. That is understandable. Even in Uttarakhand, where there are restrictions of Article 371, I could still buy Sawan Ali to build a house and stay. I may not be able to buy large acres of land for doing whatever I want, but at least to own a flat or own a house, something has to be given. If you do not do it, then I don't think we're going to see peace in Kashmir anytime soon. This is my personal feeling.
I agree.
Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to tell the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj, I've been telling everybody, is the reservation that was given to Anglo-Indian community, that there would be nominated Anglo-Indian community representative in assemblies as well as in parliament, has expired in January last. So there are no Anglo-Indians anymore. They are Indians. At the time of independence, probably they were Anglo-Indians. Now they are born of Indians and they are just Indians. So the sunset clause has kicked in and that's got abrogated. But genuinely, Kashmiri Pandits need a representation. You cannot on your own win a single municipal council. Be it Jammu, be it Srinagar, be it anywhere. Literally, Kashmiri Pandits are so scattered that you will not be able to win any election. Forget about MLA or forget about MP. So your voice needs to be heard in the Kashmiri Assembly as well as in the Parliament. So my sincere request is, if not anything, I think all of you should come together to jointly, collectively put a petition to the government requesting for you to be heard in the Parliament. Some representation, some representative to be nominated. Maybe you should ask for both the seats, but in my view, you deserve it, one, and second is Sindhis. Yeah. They lost the entire state. At least Kashmir is legally in India, but Sindh is completely lost to Pakistan and their community is completely gone. Sindhi Hindus also deserve some representation. Both of you need representation. I think you should do that.
Agreed. Let's hope for the best. And one thing that I would point out is that there was a change in trend when the BJP came to power. There was one MLA, Girdhari Lal Rana, Ajay Bharati, who was taken. In fact, he was the, I think, MLC. And there was another person called Surinder Ambardar. So two of them were there. Obviously, it was not like a permanent feature, but I'm sure that over a period of time now, the government should think about it. It's an important suggestion that you've done.
I'm saying it should be legalized.
It should be
formalized.
Yes.
That means at least for the next 25 years, Kashmiri Pandits will have a nominated representative.
Yes.
We will review it after 25 years. Something like that should happen.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'll start opening up for people to ask questions.
Sure.
One small thing is, now I have a lot of appreciation for the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj. Like what you rightly said, you retained your traditions. A lot of people here do not know that the Kashmiri Pandit Samaj is mostly, their practices are centered around Havan. They do a lot of Havan, they do a lot of Yagna Karma. So that is something wholesomely lacking in South India. So I was very impressed with the way that this tradition is still followed in many parts of, I mean, you go there at least to do that and come back, but then it's still happening. So yeah. I encourage all participants here to visit Kashmir. Unless we, the rest of India, visit Kashmir, you cannot take back Kashmir.
Absolutely.
Mere Article 370 abrogation is not going to save you. I request all of you to kindly go to Kashmir. Fine, sir. So we'll open it up. J.S. Murthy Garu, Professor J.S. Murthy Garu, please go ahead, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Please go on.
Okay, Aditya Raj, very happy to hear you. I just followed everything. I know Sushil Panditji personally very well. Sushil Panditji, we invited him several times to Andhra. And normally I meet him in Delhi. Okay, I have two questions, brief. One thing is, after 370 abrogation, how the youth of Kashmir Valley feel it? Is it a favorable, do they feel it a favorable thing, or do they feel still something is knocked out of them? That is first question. And now, what are the major changes in Kashmir that happened after this, which are beneficial to the population there and beneficial to the country? That is a sub-clause of my first question. Then I have another question is, see, as you said, we have been trying to make the Western world understand our stance, and the attempts are here and there sporadic. Of course, now it is more and more. But can we have a concerted effect or effort throughout important countries with the help of the government of India and coordinating our embassies and taking our intelligentsia? I always say the so-called people who are in the media so far, the Barkatats and all, they are simple mediocres. We are real intellectuals. I always say that. So we have to project our India to them to understand. That is to get over the so-called Western filter, and which can become a prelude to strengthen the slogan of rewriting India. Of course, rewriting India's history, we have to do it in two-pronged way. One is within India, and the second is winning over the Western intellectuals. These are two things. Will you please elaborate on this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor G.S. Murthy. When we talk about the response of the common population and particularly the youth in Kashmir, we have to take in, we have to think about the growing radicalization. Yes, there is a significant population, as I said, who are happy with the kind of action that was taken against Abdullahs and Muftis. There is a certain population which is also happy that 370 is gone, and this might invite more investment, this might invite more jobs, this might invite more tourism, not immediately, but perhaps in some time to come. But there's a significant population that has been radicalized. There's a significant population that is undergoing even now radicalization. Now, when we come to Kashmir, unfortunately, we just hover over Srinagar or maximum Badgam and end our journey there. Or even, people who observe or, come to Kashmir to take a visit, they just go to Srinagar and Badgam and that's about it. But the real Kashmir lies in the interiors of South and North Kashmir, in the interiors of Shopian, Anantnag, Kulgam in South, and in Kupwara, Handwara, Sopore, Baramulla and North. I'll give you one example, and this is post Article 370, when I visited Kashmir. And I met the GOC of Army at that time there, Lieutenant General KGS Dhillon. You might have seen him active on Twitter. And he is now in New Delhi now. He will be taking as one of the military intel chiefs under the new CDS. And he told me that, why don't you go to Pulwama? Why don't you go to the same area where that unfortunate attack took place last year, killing 40 of our Jawans? So I said, I'll go. Although a couple of journalists with me were a little skeptical because of security, but he said, no, you should go, you should visit Pulwama and see how people are reacting to Article 370 gone. I said, perfect, I'll go. So I visited a couple of villages. There's a temple that Giridharji would know. I think I told him about the story also, which is Crew in Pulwama, very close to Pampore. Yeah. So while I was passing through Crew, I saw some noise coming from the mosque. So there was azan time. So we stopped there. There were a lot of army vehicles also with me. And we were around 3 journalists. So we stopped for the Maulvi to come out. So the Maulvi came out with a lot of youth particularly. And there were about 40-50 people surrounding us from that particular village. And we tried to just engage that particular Maulvi in a discussion. And we asked him that, what do you think about Article 370? And he said, नहीं, Article 370 तो हमारा बुनियादी हक था और आप लोगों ने वो ले लिया. So this was our basic right and you guys have taken it away. And we will continue to fight as much as we can and take it back. And we will not allow you to take Article 370 away. I said, perfect, we understand. We'll report whatever you say, but you at least tell me that you say Article 370 has been taken away. This was your basic right, but what do you think has been taken away? What such thing will change for you particularly? And that Maulvi in Pulwama said that, our jobs will be taken away. I said, okay, your jobs will be taken away. But what jobs do you have in this particular village in Pulwama near Crew? He said, we have these brick kilns and, cement factories. I said, how many of them? He said, 8. I said, how many people work? He said, around 400, 500. I said, boss, if there is a lot of terrorism happening, if there's a lot of violence happening, stone pelting, etc., will you send your son to that particular area to do a job or do employment? Then how do you think that people from outside will come and, take away your jobs, etc.? At that point, he said, no, I don't want to engage in any kind of discussion with you. I just know one thing, that we will give our life. And he started screaming, and we will give our life, but we will not, go back. And that moment, there was a little bit of sloganeering, etc. from across, and a lot of youth also joined in, and then the army had to disperse them. So this is the reality. The reality is that there's a lot of radicalization that's happening in villages even now. Every morning and evening, whenever there is an azan or a preaching that happens every Friday, the Maulvis or the Maulanas preach this kind of hatred to people, that you have to fight it out. They do not surrender to any kind of logic. They do not understand any kind of logic or any kind of rational thought. They just tell them that this is about Islam and you have to die for Islam. It does not matter. And Kashmir will be taken away. It was an Islamist land and Sharia has to apply here. This is what is taught to them. So my suggestion to the government was that while you have taken this larger step of Article 370, which is for greater progress, you also asked that what will change? A lot of things will change. Right to education, right to information, jobs, different other prime minister schemes that used to be there, which did not apply there, will apply now to Article 370. So in many ways, when they say that, we Kashmiri Pundits are happy, in reality, for Kashmiri Pundits, Kashmir was the same before 370 and after 370 also. It will change for the common people there. They will get a lot of opportunities. They will get a lot of jobs. They will, perhaps if the terrorism decreases, they will get a lot of investment and factories and hospitals, etc. as well. Educational institutions as well. But unfortunately, you have to understand that till the time you say that this is a political problem, this is not a political problem. This is an Islamist problem. And till the time you don't realize this, you will not be able to change things. What I suggested, at that time I had suggested then that, 370 you have done, but you need to make people at the grassroots level understand in Urdu that this has been done for your benefit. Because there's so much of propaganda, there's so much of brainwashing that happens every morning and evening. And overnight, nothing is going to change. So till the time this common population, particularly in South Kashmir, that has been radicalized by jihadis, it will not change. So I told them that, like Saudi does, that these Maulanas are not allowed to preach till there is a fax paper that comes to them, and this is the only line that you will take. So you have to tell them, you have to persuade these Maulanas to change their tactics, that this is not going to work out. If you take action against a couple of Maulanas who are, preaching hatred, there will be a significant change. So you have to understand that this has to be done at the grassroots level as well, which we haven't done till date.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with you, especially in places like Shopian, Kulgam, Pulwama, all these places. I think Maulvis are the ones to be caught first, and then
yes,
some change.
Also, Professor Murthy also asked me about, on the narrative front and how people from all across, the intellectuals, etc., could be brought into our favor. To take such steps, we have to first realize that we are missing somewhere. We're missing the boat somewhere. And I think the biggest challenges for us on the messaging front, on the communication front, happened last year. One, of course, was Article 370 and what happened post that, the kind of attacks that happened from international media and particularly several countries as well. But what also happened after Balakot, post Pulwama, we did a strategically important step of Balakot, but within a few hours, it got overturned because, of course, Abhinandan went there. I don't hold Abhinandan responsible or the Air Force responsible. He's a brave officer. He's India's hero. But Indian government and the Indian establishment completely remained silent for the entire day when that entire thing happened. So this gave time to Pakistan to build on that propaganda that strategically Pakistan was at a higher pedestal, etc. I think I had written an article also for India Today in that regard, that how Pulwama may have been the biggest intelligence failure of India in the last many years, since 26/11. But it should have been a reminder, Balakot should have been a reminder to us that we need to place our communication strategy well. We need to realize that intra-ministry communication, intra-security communication of India needs to be tightened, and we need to understand. So this is what Asif Ghafoor used to do. Asif Ghafoor, ISPR in Pakistan used to prevail because they knew that every opportunity for them to play on this Kashmir card, to play on against India, they used it significantly. But when that Balakot thing happened, unfortunately, there was an accident in Badgam as well, where we lost 8 of our Jawans, Air Force Jawans, in that helicopter crash on the same day. But the Defense Ministry, the Home Ministry, the External Affairs Ministry, the PMO remained completely silent for an entire day. And I think we lost the communication battle that time. Perhaps we could have gained a little post-Article 370, but again, I think we missed the boat somewhere. So I think there has to be a communication strategy. As I said, you either decide that you have to act like US President Trump or Xi Jinping in China and ignore the media completely. You don't bother about it. You have to take some steps. You're confident about it. You don't bother about what people talk about, and you take them. Or else you have a communication strategy in place. You know where to strike at what time. And that's where we missed, but perhaps we'll realize now.
Yeah, I think you correctly said, kind of analyzed it. Government is very good in trying to take tough decisions, but it's pathetic in terms of communicating it. That's where we are getting really badly hurt. The typical example is CAA. See what's happened in CAA.
Exactly.
The communication has been disastrous. And strangely enough, the whole country burnt, or at least parts of the country burnt after CAA, but nothing happened in the valley. Valley was pretty silent. That is very strange, actually.
And if I could mention one sentence, while the CAA was on, one of the significant players, Safura, Safura Zahoor, I think, is a Kashmiri. She was one of the key coordinators of this entire CAA. So now she has been also arrested, and NSA has been slapped against her. But yeah, this has happened, and CAA has been a disaster, really. It was a very significant step, because I remember as a TV journalist, the first story that I did for Times Now was on the Pakistani Hindus who were suffering here for years together in a camp in Delhi. I visited that camp and I did that story. And I knew about, because I was in touch with Hindu Singh Soda in Jodhpur and several others people, because Jodhpur has one of the biggest, inhabitants from Pakistan, Hindus who have been staying there for camp for a very long time. So what used to happen is that they used to get an extension of 6 months for visa. And this is also only a population of about 31,000 or 32,000 that we are talking about. And still, the government wasn't able to convey the message that this does not bother any Indian citizen. But anyways, this is past. I think we have moved on from that time.
Yeah. One thing before I call the next speaker to talk about, I think there was a vested interest in the Kashmiri politicians and Kashmiri governments to keep the the Gurez Valley completely isolated, and nothing happened there. You needed a DC's permission to go there, blah blah blah, whatever, and then they were completely shut off. Now, what's stopping this government? Why is Gurez still kept so underdeveloped? There's just 2 hours power in Gurez, and
I know, I agree.
It's like and they are the ones who want to be with India. Whoever wants to be with India, all those constituencies in the valley have suffered. So that's continuing. That's the sad part of it. I think somewhere whenever you interact with the powers that be, this has to be brought in, because we don't want a perfectly peaceful pro-India place suddenly getting disillusioned that Article 370 did nothing for us.
I agree. In fact, what I want to just point out here is that Surinder Ambardar, who was one of the MLCs, he had started, along with several other locals, Gurez Festival every year. I was invited. Unfortunately, I couldn't go there, but there was some initiative. And there was this, the Shahid Iqbal Chaudhry, who's the Srinagar, DC right now. He was the Bandipura DC. Gurez also came under him at that particular time. And he tried to do a little bit, but I think the government administration needs to focus on Gurez as well, because I think it is even more beautiful than Pahalgam or Gulmarg for that matter. So this step has to be done and taken up immediately after this corona cycle really ends. Also, I just a question just popped up, if I could take that, because Kashmiri Pandit community is very close to me, and I think Shelja ji asked here that why Kashmiri Pandits have not been protesting for 2 decades. I would just mention here that Kashmiri Pandits have been protesting for 3 decades now. If you go to Google history and check, we have organized protests. At that time, there used to be Boat Club here in Delhi, India Gate, Jantar Mantar. This is, I'm talking about Delhi. Then you take into account Hyderabad. There's a Kashmiri Pandit Association in Hyderabad. There is Kashmiri Pandit Association in Bangalore, in Chennai, in Kolkata, in Jaipur, in as many places as possible. But it has always gone into deaf ears. I mean, I'm embarrassed to even say that, Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi have roots in Kashmir. Whenever they have a cultural program or a religious program or a wedding, they will use all Kashmiri customs, etc. But the minute that ends, they forget about Kashmir. There was this trend of calling Rahul Gandhi this Janevdari, and he went to this, I think it was in Bharatpur in Rajasthan, or Pushkar for that matter. And he talked about his ancestry, Kashmiri Pandit ancestry, but the reality remains that they have nothing to do with Kashmir. They don't know the reality. They have never spoken about the plight of Kashmiri Pandits. So Kashmiri Pandits is we are a small community. What we have done is that we have never picked up arms. We have never believed in violence, but we have believed in education. On our own merit, we have stood up. I have n number of stories of people who have stayed in camps in the worst possible conditions in Jammu and still became toppers in different colleges and universities, and now are across the globe. I'll give you one small example. There's a particular gentleman called Sunilji Bhatt. He is, I think, about 32, 33 years old, and he is the bureau chief of India Today and Aaj Tak right now in Jammu. And he, for 18 years or more, has stayed in a camp in Jammu, in the Muthi area of Jammu. And if you see that, I visited that camp once in 2006 when he still used to stay there. And I almost had tears in my eyes. It was, if you know what an igloo is, it was like an igloo. It was a small oval structure where 5 or 6 members of the family used to stay. Whenever there was high rainfall, the water used to come inside. There were only 2 beds there, and everybody had to sit all through the night because there was rainwater all across. So these are the pathetic conditions that he had to undergo and study all through this period in that camp. And to top it all, he came to Delhi. He did his graduation from Delhi University, and he came in contact with me during that time. And one fine day, I'll just end it here. One fine day, he called me in the evening and he said, "I'm not feeling well and I'll just faint." I said, "Where are you? I'll come down." He said, "I'm in Nehru Place in Delhi." So I went to Nehru Place, and he was fainted, and there were a lot of people around him. I picked him, I gave him water, and I brought him to home. And I asked him, what's wrong with you? For the first 1 hour, he couldn't talk. After 1 hour, I told him that, you need to speak up. What's wrong with you? He said, I'm very worried. I said, what are you worried about? He said, I'm worried because, of my education. I have to do my MA. And it's a huge problem. I said, what is money is problem? I'll help you out. I'll do something. He said, no, that is not the problem. I said, what is the problem? He said, I want to do MA in journalism and mass communication. So I said, what is the problem? If you want to go to a brilliant university, you can. You're a great student. You're a topper. He said, no, I applied in Indian Institute of Mass Communication. I applied in Amity University. I applied in AGK, MCRC in Jamia. I applied in XIC in Mumbai. I applied in Asian College of Journalism, 6 places. I said, so he said, I'm a topper in all the 6 places. I'm confused. Where should I go? So I said, this is absolute madness. So this is how we have come out. He had no means. He had no money. His parents stayed in that igloo of a camp, but his problem was that he was not able to decide where to go. Of course, he had money problems, etc., as well, and that was a concern as well, to choose which place to go. So it's wrong to say that Kashmiri Pundits haven't protested. We've protested, and many of us have moved on. While I continue to raise it on social media, many of us raise it on social media. Many of the people don't want to go into that dark phase yet again in Kashmir. Because once you land in Kashmir, yes, it's beautiful. Gulmarg and Pahalgam is heaven on earth. But if you interact with common people, some of them there, they will say that you are part of us, you are etc., etc. But there's a lot of hatred, there's a lot of this jihadi element, a lot of radicalization that we can live away with. We're happy without it.
Yeah, fair enough. So Sridharji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Namaste ji.
Namaskar.
Yeah. So basically, Ambedkar was talking about Islam, and he stated that for a Muslim, the identity, essentially comes from the religion, not from the country or a nation. So probably because of, the Pakistan is an evidence, Bangladesh, Pakistan is evidence, and Kashmir seems to be in the same way. Probably, I don't know. How long, for how far we are going to deal with these dual identities within the country? Maybe in Kashmir, tomorrow in West Bengal, tomorrow in Kerala. So where we are heading for actually? Is there in a think tank how to solve this kind of, maybe down the line 10 years or something like this, constantly if we are in turmoil within our country, where we can focus about development or anything else. So should we have a real think tank about this, how to really, go ahead with this problem? Thank you.
That's a very important question that you have asked, because, while we always blame, or rightly so, external factors like Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., and terrorism, etc., we also need to look inwards, that how will we sustain, how will we survive, how will development really last if such internal rebellion, dual identity really comes across. With respect to Kashmir, if we talk about, I don't see this getting solved, at least in my lifetime. Of course, I see a lot of changes, particularly till August 5 last year, I was very, very, pessimistic. And I didn't really, think that anything could change, because I had reported extensively from Kashmir. I had seen the response of the political establishment, both the BJP, the Congress, the left, etc. And I think I rightly believe that what we have seen in Kashmir will germinate particularly in Assam and in Kerala, and perhaps around Telangana, Andhra also, if we don't wake up in time. And the government and its advisors need to think about it and take action with iron fist in this regard. Because if we don't do it right now, we will completely miss the bus. And it could be a nightmare. One example in this regard is the growth of the ISIS as well. Particularly in South, we've seen a lot of elements, particularly from Kerala, from Karnataka, and from Telangana, going to Afghanistan and Iraq. During that time, I remember when I used to cover the ISIS, and I even visited Iraq, in Baghdad, I used to, through Telegram and some other medium, interact with some of those South Indian ISIS elements over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I used to tell them that, what kind of mockery are you doing? Think about your families. Think about everything back home. And they were so radicalized to such an extent. And imagine if India would have taken action appropriately 20 years, in the 90s itself. Clearly, we would have been in a very different state right now. And this is like a ticking time bomb. And it's not just Jammu and Kashmir. It is particularly in Assam, in West Bengal, in Kerala, and in Telangana as well. If we don't wake up in time, it would be certainly something very aggressive and violent. I really shudder to think what could really happen. But I do hope that the current government has been thinking about it, has been taking action step by step, and I do hope that some significant steps are taken.
Sorry to bother you here. Do you see any further, like maybe down the line 10 years, something like this? Maybe we are going to have a partition of this country or something like this. Is it good enough to have a partition, at least this time, completely exchange of population, something like this, which Ambedkar suggested at that time? Probably, I don't know.
See, I personally, as a pragmatic person, we may think about it, but I don't think that it is a pragmatic solution. And I don't see it happening also, at least in the next 30, 40 years or 50 years. I don't see a partition really happening. Yes, unfortunately, internal rebellion, yes. Of course, if you study the kind of propaganda that emanates from Pakistan, there is a lot of propaganda on Jammu and Kashmir. But if you see these fake handles, etc., and a lot of PR that happens from Pakistan, they talk about India's northeast. They talk about Punjab. They talk about how there is a rebellion and Indians are killing people in northeast, Indians are killing people in Punjab, while the reality is very different. So yes, there are elements who try to provoke, instigate, etc., and there will be internal rebellion on an increase. But I think over the last 5 years, there have been negotiations as well that have yielded results. Particularly in Punjab, we've seen Khalistan has been completely, it has completely ended. The Khalistani movement that only survives right now is in Canada, US, Australia, and UK, nowhere else. And that also because the Pakistani deep state funds it time and again. So, and Northeast also to a great extent, there have been negotiations. N. Ravi, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor, he was the prime negotiator. And in many of these rebels, there has been significant negotiation. I know that behind closed doors and on the grassroots level, there's a lot of work happening. And particularly on Northeast front, I'm very much sure that the rebellion will be controlled and there won't be significant increase in it.
Okay. Aditya, this is one typical favorite subject for every Indian now that Article 370 is gone. What about POJK? Do you see any signs of any interest in the Indian establishment on POJK? Or do you see that they have accepted that we'll never be able to take back and so they left it? Let's not talk about the external rhetoric.
Yeah.
How do you perceive the mind of the deep Indian state?
See, one is there are two aspects to it. One, of course, you yourself said that there's a lot of rhetoric going on.
Yeah.
That 370 happened, and next step will be, Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan occupied Ladakh. Yeah. And, we will take it back, and that is perhaps just about to happen, etc., etc., etc. We will be, of course, foolish to think that it is going to happen immediately, because there are larger security aspects that need to be taken into, shape. But having said that, I wouldn't say that it is impossible. I wouldn't say this because, one, I trust our security establishment in the country. I now trust the political establishment all the more after August 5 decision has been taken. And I feel that they have a long-term plan in mind. Also, we need to take into consideration that when this August 5 decision was taken, it was India's Raw Chief, Samant Kumar Goel, who had suggested to the Prime Minister, not many know, that, sir, this is the right time to do it. Because, the decision was taken almost when that CRPF attack took place, killing 40 of our Jawans. The decision was almost taken at that time that we have to revoke and abrogate Article 370. But it took a lot of time to plan. Of course, elections had to be there as well. Execution took a lot of time. And August was chosen because the Raw Chief said that, sir, at this moment, there is no terror activity happening at all. All the camps are shut because there is FATF pressure on Pakistan. Financial Action Task Force is in Pakistan's head that you need to end this terrorism, this Hawala racketeering, this money laundering, etc. So they have put all the terror camps of Hizbul, Lashkar, etc. underground. All these terror chiefs have been put underground, also arrested, so-called, but kept in ISI safe houses. So and financially also, economically also, Pakistan is not doing well. So if an aggressive step is taken, Pakistan won't be able to respond. They will be confused. And that's what happened. Pakistan was confused initially. Pakistan thought that there might be a limited war on the border because there was a lot of preparation. There were, if you remember, there were more than 5 lakh paramilitary personnel who were flown almost overnight to Kashmir Valley. So this was like a psyops because Pakistan thought we are preparing for a war, but it was nothing like that. And things changed. God willing, I hope that there will be a day when you and I together will go to Sharda in Neelam Valley. And I feel that there is a long-term plan, security and political. And I also feel that, as you suggested about Kashmiri Pundits, I would go a step further. And I would suggest that there should be a seat that should be given to people from Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh in India's parliament. And there are several people who are capable of doing that. There is a gentleman called Senge Sering in United States, who is originally from Gilgit.
He was on our call last Sunday.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Senge is a great person. There are several others from there. I know so many of people from there who would love to do this. And India should now strategically approach this subject, because this is a moment when even China is afraid with this CPEC, which is passing through POK, because security-wise, there are a lot of challenges for China as well. So I feel that there is a long-term plan, and let's hope it will fructify one day.
Yeah, well, that's nice to hear, because at least to my knowledge, security establishment till now, they were never interested in POJK. I mean, Article 370 itself is settling within your borders, but most of the analysts said that this actually signifies that LOC is now the international border. That kind of analysis people are saying. I wanted to know how the Indian establishment is thinking. Yes, I agree with you. It is possible, but are they really thinking?
They are thinking.
Great.
They are thinking, and they have everything in mind. I mean, if you remember, I don't know if many people noticed, but just before Article 370 abrogation, India hit Neelam Valley, a particular stretch in Neelam Valley, very hard. And KJS Dhillon was the GOC at that time, and everybody thought that this could almost trigger a war.
Yeah,
and
25 kilometers inside the hit.
Yeah, this was just 3 days before the abrogation of Article 370.
Yeah.
So we have everything in mind, and let's just face it that after August 5, nothing is impossible. Great. And we would be foolish to say that this will happen overnight or 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
Long term, certainly it will happen.
Great. Shankar Pandey ji, please go ahead.
Hello, namaskar.
Namaskar.
Hi, Aditya ji.
Shankar Pandey ji is, I told you, Nagar Karyava from Shillong.
Okay.
Meghalaya.
Aditya ji, I follow you on Twitter. Is an honor talking to you.
Thank you.
I basically belong to Darjeeling from Gurkha community, but living in born and brought up in Shillong. I have seen living in the Northeast that I felt the pangs of Article 370 and 371 and the 6th schedule in the Constitution of India. And I have realized one thing, that wherever the native population of India converts or are forced to convert, then India has a problem on its hand. it was the Kashmiri Muslims originally were all Hindus. They converted, and here in the Northeast also, the native populations have converted. In Nagaland, Mizoram is 10%. So in Nagaland, NSCN is Jesus Christ, Christianity. So I think that is a major problem. And
your signal is breaking, Pandeji.
North in Meghalaya, most of the almost traditional and ways of life and for religion of the forefathers are discriminated. They don't have a single representation in the 60-member MLA assembly. So I think that is a major problem, and conversion is a big problem. I think the government has to really address that. And my question to you: how do you deal with people like Arundhati Roy and Barkha Dutt and all? When we talk of soft power, shouldn't we be looking at establishing a fund or something to get journalists across the world in our favor? They should be writing from our point of view, because our journalists are funded by them, and they are doing them a favor. Shouldn't we be looking at this also? Why shouldn't we have someone from the Washington Post writing on our behalf?
True. I agree. It's a very important question that you asked. Firstly, I don't have much to say about conversion. I think we both are on the same page. We have very significant and critical concerns on conversion, whether it happens in the Northeast, whether it happens in the south of India. And this has been happening for a very long time. We can't wear blinkers towards it. We can't look the other way. And we have to take significant steps towards it. And this could also lead to a security crisis, because particularly it is the lower strata of the society, particularly the Dalits and the backward people who are exploited time and again in the name of money, etc. And I think the government realizes this as well, and steps would be taken significantly in this regard as well. Secondly, you talk about the so-called intellectual circuit, the liberal circuit, which has exploited over the years these foreign mediums, etc., against India. I think it's high time that we realize this, and I think there is a growing realization as well, and that's why there has been a significant step that has been taken by the security establishment of the country as well. One, that the so-called these urban exiles and Maoist overground workers have been arrested for the first time, the so-called Gautam Navlakhas of the world, and same with the Kashmiri radical separatists as well. So the NIA has done a marvelous job when it comes to the funding, the overground work, and the so-called intellectual support to these elements. Most of them have been arrested, or a significant, strong message has been conveyed to them that this will not be tolerated. On the second land, you also mentioned about why we can't, stimulate and grow these elements and have our own voice in foreign media. See, that's where the communication comes into play. That's where the messaging comes into play. And that's why I had suggested quote Article 370 also, that across New York Times and Washington Post, etc., there's a lot of money spent by these Islamist groups to fund these articles and propaganda against India, and we should do the same. Now, the scene was that India didn't want to get into some kind of a competition mode there. If somebody is spending about 6 million into propaganda against India and United States, now India doesn't want to waste those 6 million. India can do it. There's no, going past. But I looked into figures. I looked into who all is doing this propaganda. We need to also understand that one is strategy. India is acting as per strategy. And one is propaganda. A propaganda which has been supported by the Muslim world. Be it on one hand Pakistan, on the other hand OIC, on the other hand the so-called Muslim charity groups in US, in Middle East, etc., who are funding them in millions together. So instead of focusing our energies to this money war or propaganda war competition, I think India strategically working is far more beneficial. Of course, there's no doubts that we need to have a communication strategy. And I think we have a very important figure in the name of S. Jaishankar, who is the Foreign Minister of India, and he understands like nobody else the communication strategy. And I think he has made some changes and realized the mistakes as well, and that will be taken care of. But let me also tell you the soft power and how India has helped countries by giving this medicine in this time of crisis and pandemic. is going to bear fruits, is going to help significantly. I'll also point out here, although this isn't something that we should praise ourselves for, you know what happened with UAE. UAE is one of the West Asian countries, Middle East countries that is the closest to India right now. Anything that we tell to UAE will almost be agreed upon immediately. Why this happened? Of course, there's a lot of charisma of Prime Minister Modi as well. But the UAE princess, who had in fact escaped from UAE and almost reached Goa waters, was handed over back to them. Now, of course, there are human rights concerns, there are humanitarian concerns. We can discuss that for hours together. But India did what it had to in Indian national security interest, in Indian strategic interest. And that has paid results like anything. I mean, from Christian Michel coming to India, from UAE welcoming the Article 370 abrogation, the first country to welcome this, to the shock of Pakistan. So I think India's soft power, India's humanitarian gesture, and Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy and power push globally is significantly going to help.
Yeah, but I would just add a pinch of salt, word of caution at that.
Yes.
We gave a lot of, soft power display in Kathmandu, but they're still gone into the hands of the dragon. It really didn't help us when we helped them so much during the earthquake. We were the first responders. Yet today, the anti-India feeling is only growing there, and the Chinese grip is tightened there.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree, but there was a lot of communication gap at that time as well, because India also took a very drastic step at that time. We stopped a lot of trucks and trade and a lot of aid at the Tehrai areas belt. So it was seen as China was able to convey this propaganda in Nepal that India is trying to cut off food supplies. India is trying to cut off you from land-rooted economy for you. So this was a resentment or a feeling for some time, but I think the game is again changing. I feel it is slow, but it is turning pro-India yet again slowly.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, we lost a Hindu kingdom. Hopefully, it shouldn't become a communist kingdom. Let's hope it will come back sometime.
Yeah.
Ravi ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, everybody speaks about Kashmiri Pundits. Why are you not taking along that Kashmiri Dalits like that?
Yeah, so I will, should I go ahead?
Yeah, yes. Please.
Yeah, so the thing is that there are no Kashmiri Dalits. Kashmiri Pundits are just Kashmiri Pundits. I mean, even in the Kashmiri Pandit population, there is no stigmatization or brackets, etc. The Dalits that I was talking about are the larger Hindu Dalits. What had happened was that 50 years ago, of course, I can send some reading material to Giridharji who can then pass it on, which has significant details about it. There was a crisis of municipality. There was a crisis and a lot of strike going across Jammu and Kashmir. And Jammu and Kashmir had to reach out to Punjab and other states for some help, I think more than 50 years back. And about a few thousand sanitation workers and municipal workers from Punjab, who were Dalits, went from Punjab to Jammu and Kashmir. And they started working there. And with time, with years, with decades, they settled there. And their population is huge at this stage. They are perhaps in many, many thousands or maybe a couple of lakhs now. And these people, while they were given official sanction of a job in Jammu and Kashmir, they were being discriminated upon because their sons and daughters could only become municipal workers or sanitation workers under the municipality. So they're not Kashmiri Dalits, technically speaking, or Kashmiri Pundits for that matter, or Kashmiri Hindus. But yes, they're Hindus, and we have tried to raise their voice time and again. I'm myself guilty, I will say this very openly, that I only came to know about this, I think somewhere around 2008 or 9. And since then, we've been doing whatever is possible. As I said, there was a gentleman called Pushpendra Kulshrestha. He ran an NGO called the Visa Citizens, and he was the first person who I supported, and he reached out to the Supreme Court of India for this petition against Article 370, I think about 5 or 6 years back.
Yeah, but we step back a bit. why are there no Dalit Hindus in the valley, natives of Hindu valley, is that they're all converted essentially.
Yeah.
Except some portion of Brahmin community, even not the entire Brahmin community, majority of the Brahmin community is also converted. Just a small portion of the Brahmin community remained Hindus. And the rest of the communities, be it Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, or Khatris, all the rest of the communities in the Kashmir valley are all converted, including Dalits. So Kashmir valley is more or less save the brave few lakhs of Kashmiri Pundits. It's completely been Islamized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the issue. So what Aditya is referring to are the imported Dalits. They are not the natives of the land. Yeah. Thank you. So Ravi ji, you wanted to continue the question? Yeah.
సరే సార్.
Yeah.
అంటే నేను అనేది ఏంటంటే సార్, ఇప్పుడు వాళ్ళను కనుక మనము అంటే వాళ్ళు ఫ్రింజ్ని చూసి టార్గెట్ చేస్తారు కాబట్టి ఆ ఫ్రింజ్ని మనం కాపాడుకోకపోతే కనుక వాళ్ళు ఇస్లామైజేషన్ అయిపోతుంది. నేను అనేది అది
అయిపోయింది అంటున్నాను నేను. అది కాశ్మీర్కి సంబంధించి వాల్యూలో ఉన్న వాళ్ళది అయిపోయింది. ఇప్పుడు వెళ్ళిన వాళ్ళు దళితులు అక్కడ ఉన్న వాళ్ళు who are having the citizenship of Jammu and Kashmir or residency permits, they are not the original natives of Kashmir. బయట నుంచి వచ్చిన వాళ్ళు. సో వాళ్ళకి సంబంధించే ఇప్పుడు ఆర్టికల్ 370 తీయడం జరిగింది.
ఓకే,
థ్యాంక్ యూ. I just explained to him in Telugu.
Sure. Got it.
Yeah. Faninder ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Please go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Namaskar ji.
Namaskar.
Sir, I would like to know about the international communities, like other countries, who will support India if war taken place or some diplomatic conflict comes with China and Pakistan. One question, sir. Another thing, the leased POK leased from Pakistan to China. What is going on from Indian side to recoup? Can you give your opinion?
Okay, so if a war takes place, one, I am pretty much sure that in near future there will not be any war. Yes, there could be skirmishes, there could be some low-scale intensity in whatever military warfare or whatever we see on the border, but I don't see a war happening. And even if a war really happens, I think India has that diplomatic capacity that even if not so many nations support India, many of them will not even criticize. Because, one thing after Article 370 abrogation is clear, that India has done whatever it could to save its own sovereignty, to save its own, land. And it was internal to India in many ways. The first two statements that came out after 370 abrogation were from Maldives and UAE, both Muslim nations, and both welcomed Prime Minister Modi's steps, saying that these were steps taken internal to India and no foreign power, etc., should criticize or has anything to say, because these were steps taken in the interest of the Indians staying in Jammu and Kashmir. So, as I said, war is not a possibility in near future, but I do feel that even if it is an eventuality that happens sometime, I think most of the important nations will strategically remain mute, not to upset India in any way. Secondly, I think I didn't get that question entirely. I think it was about Pakistan occupied Kashmir and China's investment in it and the CPEC, etc. I think China has strategically done this over the last 10 to 15 years, systematically pouring in a lot of money, etc. In Pakistan, but not realizing that this is going to be a one-way investment. They do irk India to a great extent by supporting Pakistan, by remaining mute spectator to terrorism that happens time and again. I think the only time that I saw China once raising concerns was during the BRICS summit in Yemen that I had the pleasure, privilege to cover, I think two years back. And apart from that particular time, China hasn't raised terror at all. So yes, India has to remain concerned. And significantly, one thing that I see lacking, as Giridharji also mentioned, that India's intelligentsia and India's government and India's bureaucrats were not concerned about POK over the years. And it was almost, given away completely. Now there's a growing realization strategically as well that these mistakes need to be corrected. And I feel CPEC has been a challenge, and we need to think about it in greater detail as well.
Yeah, I hear a couple of voices which says that should Pakistan implode at some point in time, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, whenever it happens, and it is going to implode, then probably China would take over at least the GB part of it, right? So they have strategic interests there, and India may still not get hold of it. China has already put its boots on the ground, and so it may not be possible for us to take back. But then somebody who have some friends in the establishment, they say that obviously we have factored that. We have assumed that China would be interested, and we know we have to work out models where we take care of that as well. So I think it's pretty fluid, but then at the intellectual level, we need to bring out a consensus that is Bharat, and that has to be taken back.
Exactly.
If
that should be the primary concern, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
If that is the kind of a pressure from intellectuals of this country keeps relentlessly going to the government, they will not be able to really give it up so easily.
Overall, the narrative in mainland India has to bring into picture POK as part of India. You rightly said that. Yeah. And we, I think, over the last few years had forgotten that. And we need to completely, because I remember when there was recently an earthquake in POK, I said that we should help our brothers in POK because, it's our own land. True. It was just a statement to irk Pakistanis. But I think we need to talk about POK more often. We need to claim POK more often. And there need to be steps taken legally as well, including a parliament seat, etc., to, claim that land.
I fully agree with you. In fact, I was appalled when, Imran Khan had gone to Skardu, and he addressed the people there, Mere pyare Baltistani, Pakistani bhaiyon. And there was not a whimper of a protest from India.
Yeah.
Whereas even if a parinda flies into Arunachal Pradesh from Indian side, the Chinese embassy will issue a démarche.
Exactly.
So that's something ridiculous. I think the thinking process in the establishment in Delhi is, ye hamara nahi hai, chhod do usko. That kind of a behavior they had. When you are saying they're now at least trying to have a look at it, gives me some comfort. Yeah. Before I ask the other speaker, what are your views on the UN mandate? Now you have the UNSC resolution, and you have the UN body sitting in Dalgate next to Durganath Mandir. That office is there. Should India get out of that particular resolution and withdraw its complaint, and then deal with Pakistan the way they want to do it? That's one suggestion people give. Another suggestion is, since your legality, your documentation and everything is in your favor, you should take it to the ICJ and claim the territory back, like the way Philippines had done to South China Sea on China, right? So there are two views. One is use the UN to your advantage. Don't go to the UNSC. UNSC is a political body. Go to the ICJ, right? And you withdraw from the UN. Another view is forget UN. You deal with Pakistan yourself. There are two views. How do you look at it?
Firstly, I think we all have a consensus that UN is a toothless body.
Correct.
And there is no looking towards UN for solutions that we have to take care of. And these are internal solutions. UN has no business at all. So the first thing that the Indian government should do, not immediately, but I think strategically at an appropriate time, is that throw this UN Mogib office of Srinagar out of it. One, you will get some prime land for your government out there. And secondly, it's a very picturesque area, by the way, just next to the Sarovar Portico Hotel.
That's the only place we get vegetarian food in Srinagar. So
exactly, Krishna Dhaba.
Walk past that every day.
Krishna Dhaba, yeah.
Krishna Dhaba.
So, you need to get rid of this first. Yeah. Secondly, and India is capable of doing that. Let me remind you that. I mean, India, when it was upset with UN, asked UN Mogib to vacate its New Delhi office.
Yeah.
So if the New Delhi office was vacated, the Srinagar would be vacated one day very soon.
Yeah.
And secondly, we need to realize that UN has no business at all with Kashmir.
Yeah.
So when I say UN, I say each and every body of UN. I say the United Nations, I say any of the NGOs of the UN, I say even the ICJ. Because once you open the floodgates to any kind of legal solution or approach the ICJ for any kind of such mandate, you give full freedom to the ICJ, or you give full freedom to any country, including Pakistan, to reach out to the ICJ for any damn concern or damn propaganda of theirs. So that floodgate has not to be opened. That would be a strategic blunder. I personally feel so. And secondly, I feel that at United Nations, I must compliment Syed Akbaruddin, who is a great friend of mine, and he has done a significant job. I met him when I went to US in Feb, and what a person. Unfortunately, he's retiring on 5th of May, and he said that he's originally from Hyderabad, and he said that
he speaks Telugu and he studied in Satyasai College.
Yeah.
Give me more info about him. Yeah.
Yeah. So he told me that he has a wonderful, very beautiful house that he has made in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
And with his family, he would settle there and not even look towards diplomacy. But I personally feel that Prime Minister has other plans for him. And let's hope that those plans also reach some consensus and he agrees. But he has been doing a brilliant job. I tell this to many diplomats, many of them who don't want to even hear this part, that Syed Akbaruddin is a fit case of how an Indian diplomat should be. Strategically, the way he talks, the way he addresses is brilliant. Even I was upset with him one day, I remember, in 2014, when we were in G20 conference in Australia and Melbourne. And because Indian media is completely, we only cover stories around Pakistan, US and China. So there was something that had happened in regard to China, and I asked him in a G20 conference, and he said, Mr. Kaul, you'll have to wait for him. I'm not going to answer such questions. And he was very sarcastic with me. But anyways, I loved him from that particular day, and he's been doing a brilliant job at the UN. He could have been even India's foreign secretary, but I think the Prime Minister thought that he would do the best at the UN, and he's been doing that.
Yeah, and he's a great patriot at heart.
He's a great patriot at heart, yes.
Thank you. Appaji, please go ahead, sir.
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yeah. No, ahead. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, yeah.
Namaste, Aditya ji. Thanks for the clarity that you have given us all through. And now this today's topic being the media games, and you are from this journalist background, I just wanted to know a different thing from you. Your background here, it says that you are working for this Republic TV and Times Now also earlier. It was after a very, very long time, we could get at least 2 channels who will speak our mind in the media. One this thing I wanted to know, that how is possible in this country? Because it was extremely difficult for us to achieve it after independence. And now somehow at least there are 2 channels. Is there anything else? Any other efforts are being done on this front to get into our fold? Any other channels or any other efforts are being done? I just wanted to know.
Well, I just feel that I share your concern that over the last many decades, there was so much of propaganda, one-sided narrative, time and again. And after many years, these 2 channels have at least taken the courage to, speak up. I think there are efforts. There are efforts at small level, but efforts that will yield results in the months and years to come. It is a churning process, just like the Chakravyuh. It is a churning process, and it will take time. Every country comes across such elements and such phases, unfortunately. And particularly we, the Kashmiri Pundits, have faced the brunt of this because no media or no intellectuals or no so-called these leftists came out or protested for us. nobody raised any campaign, etc., because we were a minuscule minority, and we spoke about India. So I think it will take time. I had the pleasure of being in Times Now, and through Times Now visiting at least 15 to 20 countries, some of them with Prime Minister Modi, and I loved that experience. And then I was with Arnab. We together initiated Republic TV. It was a very hard task because the entire media had ganged up against him. You see what is happening with him right now. But after 2 years, I left because I thought that there are new things that need to be explored. But yes, I think more power to them. They've been doing whatever they can. And I do feel that media will change. Indian media is young. It will mature as well, and it will be nationalistic in its approach. At least, you may be nationalistic or not. There shouldn't be any compromise with the country. There shouldn't be any compromise with India. When you speak about India, you can't just go on abusing the country, using propaganda, etc. And just because if you hate Modi, you go against the country, you go blindly against anything that Modi says is absolutely crap. So I have my differences. I pointedly say whenever there is something wrong that is being done, but that does not mean that you tarnish image of the most popular prime minister across the globe as somebody who has brought India to the global front lines, and with the power push and with the kind of diplomacy that he has done, and he has helped his bureaucrats and diplomats time and again. So I feel that as I said, even if there were media attacks on the prime minister, he chose his own medium. He decided that he will interact directly with his audience, which is the Indian masses, through social media, etc. And then the Indian media was forced to cover him. So the same way, the churning process will fructify one day, and more mediums will emerge.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe NewsX and Vion also go into that bracket at least. To a large extent. Definitely not the NDTV group. Definitely not.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
let's see how things pan out. I think I told you last time, right, Aditya, that I went 40 kilometers close to Sharda Beach.
Yes, you did.
That's the closest that I could go, and I had the great fortune of doing Rudramshik there. So we'll keep the promise. Both of us hopefully should be there in Sharda Beach someday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anil Sadanand ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I am Anil. I'm calling. This is from Mysore.
Okay.
Okay. Sir, I've got 4 questions. And first question is before this abrogation of... Beg your pardon, sir?
Only 4 is said.
No, 5. Straight questions. See, after or before this Article 370 abrogation, I think we saw some apartment complexes were made for the Kashmiri Pundits with high security. Is it really functioning? That is one. And second question is, what was actually the Indian Army doing when the Kashmiri Pundits were chased out? And my third question is, you have gone to Lebanon and all war-torn places. But can you give us some insight why the problem of insurgency of Maoist is not being curtailed in Chhattisgarh? And what is it? Still that people war group are dominating. We can see that once in 6 months or whatever it is, the CRPF people have been killed by landmine or whatever it is. And my fourth question is whatever the intellectual heads are there or social thinkers, they cannot change the society as such, like the actual workers. See, for example, you can see Arvind Kejriwal coming to power in Delhi is because he got himself onto the street. If he was there to philosophize or give some prophecies or write, he wouldn't have come to power. This was actually very well, deeply discussed when he came to power in Mysore. You must have heard about one Devanur Mahadev, a well-known Dalit writer. So he himself had a party and he was not able to succeed. Why that was happened? So these are my questions, sir.
See, on the Kashmiri Pandit front, as Giridharji said, that it is almost impossible to think that Kashmiri Pandits will return because one, it's been 30 years, they have settled outside, they have started from scratch and reached wherever they are right now, and they're scattered all across the globe. So yes, there have been some efforts. It's not new. It's been happening for last 10 years that there are some pockets of Kashmir, including Sheikhpura, etc. I don't remember all the places, but in at least 7-8 areas where buildings have been set up for Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmiri Pandits had their own independent houses, etc. And they lived freely in Kashmir. So why would anybody choose to live in a two-room segmented area where there is a threat to life continuously? So I don't think that Kashmiri Pandits would be willing to return, at least in near future. If time changes, if terrorism stops, if development is brought in, terror attacks stop, threats stop, then certainly there might be a thought given to it. Secondly, the Indian Army during 1990, as I said, it was a very fluid situation. Indian Army, the security forces, the BSF and the CRPF were there, but it was such a targeted killing that was happening and a mass uprising that was happening that it was nobody was able to control anything. So the Jagmohan, what happened, Jagmohan was just brought in as the governor, and overnight Jagmohan got a lot of calls from across the valley from Kashmiri Pandits saying that, we are being killed, there are threats, there are slogans from different mosques across Kashmir Valley, there are targeting attacks, stone pelting, mobs attacking houses, and there was appeal issued to him that we should support him. Next day, Kashmiri Pandits decided one by one that we'll leave and vacate. And Jagmohan provided security to Kashmiri Pandits. In many cases, also persuaded that you should stay here and we'll give you security. But the Kashmiri Pandits felt very uncomfortable, very unsafe, and decided en masse. And 19th and 20th January, which we call the Exodus Day, was the beginning of that en masse exodus. And that's when Pandits started. In fact, my family, myself, we left Kashmir on that particular night itself, early morning of 20th January. I still have that bus ticket with me, which we took. It has J&K Transport Corporation and 19th, 20th January 1990 written on it. So it would be unfair to say that the security forces or the government did not do its part. I feel, as I said earlier, that if there wasn't Governor Jagmohan, I would have been dead. And if I am alive today, it's only because of Governor Jagmohan and the security forces in the valley. Secondly, you talked about the Maoist insurgency. And I have been fortunate enough to visit Bastar at least 6 or 7 times in my 12-year career. And I feel that it has been controlled to a great extent. It may not be as much visible right now because every couple of months or 3 months, we have these attacks on CRPF or the district force in Chhattisgarh, particularly in Bastar. But you have to realize that it was not just Chhattisgarh, it was at least 4 to 5 states of India that were, engulfed in this Maoist insurgency, the entire Red Corridor. And you have to realize that the Cobras in Andhra played a huge role, a massive role in completely killing the top leadership of the, of the Maoists, their top Dandakaranya committee. And I feel that most of the top leadership has either perished or most of them are more than 75 years old. So they are about to, grow old and perish completely. Their grassroots workers have also significantly reduced, but they are active only in a particular stretch towards the south of Dandakaranya, in Bastar, in Sukma, in Jagdalpur, and all these particular areas. I personally feel that it will only take about next 5 to 6 years to wipe out Maoists completely. Now, I would tell you, because since I've reported, a particular gentleman came to me who is a journalist from Bastar. And this I'm talking about just about 4 or 5 months back. And he said that he wants to be a negotiator because he has deep connections in Maoists and he's a journalist from there. He wants to be a negotiator between the Indian government and the Maoists, because he said that the Maoists feel that they're losing their control and power, and they want a respectable solution to it. So you can imagine, if such things are happening, the Maoists are losing control to a great extent. And secondly, I feel that over the years, the government also failed to realize, or didn't want to realize, that the local tribals were not taken into confidence. Because ultimately it is the local tribals who get into, Maoists. Education development was not a primary concern. I would compliment Raman Singh in Chhattisgarh, because I felt that he did a lot of changes. He brought in a lot of development in Chhattisgarh. In fact, I was astonished to see the roads that were there, even in the interiors of the forests of Bastar in Darba Ghati. In fact, I remember I covered this attack that happened on the Congress workers, where 30 of the Congress workers and leaders were killed in May 2013. And later, a few days later, I was walking through the jungle and I found grenades also there. And then I called the bomb disposal squad. But I was astonished to see a lot of development in that area. And I feel that over the years, it has changed drastically the mindset of the tribals also. There is more belief in democracy. And with the attack on the urban Maoists also, their structure, support structure, money structure, their arms supply, things are changing. So as I said, I wouldn't have been more confident if we were speaking in 2013. But now things are changing. And I would say that within 5 to maximum 10 years, it will be finished completely. But 5 to 6 years, you will see the dead end of Maoists. You had another question, I'm forgetting it.
And the last question was about Arvind Kejriwal coming back to the power. And unfortunately, that has been a big question mark with all the intellectuals. Especially, I don't know about the rest of the country. As far as Karnataka is concerned, there's one I said that Devnur Mahadev, a Dalit icon, who is a writer by himself. And they also introspected. Why is that we are not able to come to power? We are not able to replace the regular conventional parties like the Congress, the BJP or the JDS. Why is that we not been able to replace, and how could Arvind Kejriwal did it? And my analogy is like whatever the intellectual people does, it is on the books or the papers or whatever it is. And actually the groundwork is it's entirely different. So I feel that, okay, Arvind Kejriwal really came to the ground level and worked to the people's sentiment, whatever it is, and he could garner that power. I'm talking about the first election of Delhi, not the second one.
I agree. See, there are multiple reasons for that. One is that Kejriwal worked as an activist for many years in Delhi. He was an IRS officer and then he worked as an activist. I remember he and Manish Sisodia had but supported in one of my campaigns during that Priyadashni Mattu period in 2006 as well. But then the India Against Corruption campaign happened in about 2011. And that, I think, was the trigger. And that helped in many ways, because that became a unanimous call of the entire country. And in many ways, a media campaign as well. The entire media supported it. And that in many ways also became, just like we had the several revolutions taken place in Middle East and several other areas, this almost was seen as an Indian revolution. Although it did not yield any results, apart from finally a Lokayukta happening only, I think, about last year or so. But I feel is that Kejriwal was able to connect with the masses in great way. And there was failure of the mainstream political parties also that played a role. Congress was in power for many years, for almost 15 years. Sheila Dikshit was the chief minister in Delhi. Unfortunately, the BJP did not have a face in Delhi. Apart from Harshvardhan, who is the health minister right now, who is seen as a very honest man, but still not a very popular leader across Delhi. Kejriwal, on the other hand, connected with the masses, and BJP had a very confused strategy, not just in the elections that have just happened, but over the last 2 elections, because I covered those elections from the grassroots level. They did not have a strategy in place. They did not have a face. And secondly, instead of talking about issues, etc., they started attacking Kejriwal personally from the very beginning, which I think was a mistake. Instead of focusing on a personality, just like it is, I wouldn't say that Kejriwal is Modi of Delhi, but Kejriwal has adopted all his PR tactics, all his strategy, learning from what Modi has done at the, at the global level and at the national level. You would realize that immediately after he won the elections, Kejriwal has almost turned into a Hindu Bhakt or a Hindu mass leader. He first went to a Hanuman temple, then he talked about the Hindus across the state. So I feel that Kejriwal has been able to connect with the masses. And secondly, what he has done, he realized 4 years ago that he has been talking a lot. Kejriwal was embroiled in several controversies, etc. He finally decided that he will keep his mouth shut and he will let work speak. Finally, because I stay on ground in Delhi, over the last 5 years, on electricity, on water, on development, he worked a lot. And that, I think, has helped a lot as well in this. And it would be quite a task for the BJP or the Congress to challenge him for the next many years, I personally feel.
Yeah, great. And on the Maoists, as a young kid, I saw AK-47s in my town where I grew up, Warangal.
Okay.
And,
yes.
Now it's completely wiped out from the whole of Andhra, Telangana. So Naxalites were mainstream literally in then. But if one state could do it, others could do it. Hopefully, let's hope. Yeah. Sri Salamji, go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, namaskaram.
Namaskar.
Sir, two positive changes before and after Article 370. That is the question. You got me, sir?
Two positive changes
before and after Article 370.
Yeah. What are the changes that happened after Article 370, which were not there before?
Yes, sir.
See,
correct.
Before, obviously, there were no positive things that I think Article 370 brought in. But I think post Article 370, majority positive changes are there. One, I think, significant change is that the mainstream Indian industries, etc., can now invest freely in Kashmir. Of course, there's a huge challenge of security, because I remember many of my friends who are ready to invest in Kashmir say that we will invest, we will have the infrastructure in place, but tomorrow if there is an attack or even a security guard or an employee or an engineer, who will pay for it? Who will be held responsible or accountable for it? So yes, security challenges lie there, and that's a concern that will be addressed. But I feel that the biggest first thing is that the investment will happen, because it will not only bring in more hotels, more hospitals, more education institutions and industries, but it will also with them take a lot of Indians from across India to Kashmir and stay there, and there will be a lot of intermingling that will happen. Second, but the biggest positive development is the mindset that has been hit. This mindset of Jammu and Kashmir having a special status, Jammu and Kashmir being different, Jammu and Kashmir being altogether different and special from the rest of India. This mindset has been destroyed completely. This mindset has been completely, rubbished and thrown into dustbin of history. Because I remember I attended so many television debates where these radical separatists, their so-called intellectual mercenaries, their support structures, their so-called apologist intellectuals used to come and say that no, but there is Article 370, but there is 35A, but Jammu and Kashmir is a special status, but there was an instrument of accession, but there were promises that have to be kept. And finally, with one blow, Indian government has proved that when necessary, the rule of the law will take shape, the rule of the Indian Parliament, the executive, and all its branches will prevail finally, and that has been proven. So this mindset, this emotional or psychological loss that the radical separatists, the jihadis and the separate support structure that they face is, I think, the biggest win of all, because this was unexpected. This was not something that was expected that would happen. And for us, yes, but for all those people who used to write in foreign newspapers, in foreign media, who used to hold these campaigns on the basis of this article, and also for the mainstream political parties of Jammu and Kashmir, National Conference and PDP, who wanted a self-rule, who wanted a self-determination or a so-called autonomy. So this has been destroyed completely, and they have been told that this autonomy and self-rule and self-determination is not going to work. Everything that will work will be as per Indian Constitution. The same rules that apply in the rest of country will apply in Jammu and Kashmir as well. So this is a kind of a psychological game that these guys used to play has been blown apart to pieces.
Well, with that, I think we'll end the talk here. I think it has been a very lively question answer session, and it has been, I think, Aditya ji, you have really done a wonderful job in terms of speaking out your heart out literally. But I think before we leave, let me share something which is very dear to all of us. One shilling from the Kashmir Valley I'm sharing. This is one shivling. You can see the dust. That's the sad part. But this is 11 shivlings on a single pedestal. This is on the national highway connecting Anantnag to Srinagar in a town called Vijay Vihara.
Wow.
So, I mean, Kashmir is just amazing. It's just abode of Shiva. So I had the fortune of putting those little water on the shivlings there. Maybe I must have done something in my previous birth that I had this opportunity to travel to Kashmir a lot, and topic of Kashmir obviously keeps me also pretty emotional, makes me very emotional. And thanks a lot, Aditya ji, for the wonderful talk that you gave, and I wish we all have the safety and security and opportunity tomorrow to go to our temples in the valley and to be normal, like what we are all Hindus. We should be able to visit all of them and then restore them to their glory. This is what let's all pray and hope. And thanks again. Thank you all once again for being part of this wonderful talk today. And we'll see you tomorrow again.
Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. Namaskar.
Jai Hind.
Bharat Mata ki Jai.